Welcome back. This is the Daily Brief. Like I'd mentioned to you, a very busy day within the corridors of justice. Now, a petition challenging the August election of Changamwe Member of Parliament, one Mr. Omar Mwinyi, is currently going on. The appellant, that is Abdi Daib, moved to court to appeal to the challenge when the High Court actually upheld the election of the current Member of Parliament. That is happening right now. Let's listen in.
Administrative action. Article 73, responsibilities of the state officers, and 81, 82, and 86 that govern the conduct of the election. In its written submissions, appellant alludes to the supremacy of the Constitution. The specific statutory provisions alleged to have been breached, as outlined by the appellant in the Memorandum of Appeal, include the Election Offences Act, the Election Act, and the Independent IBC Act number 9. In relation to subsidiary registration, the specific provisions are the regulations whose contravention is complained of by the appellant, including Regulation 5, 69, 74, and 86, among others. In a bid to synchronize the purported contravention of the aforementioned legal provisions with the issues raised in this appeal, the appellant outlined specific findings of the trial court, the scrutiny report, and other evidence presented before the trial court. The alleged irregularities, malpractices linked to the constitutional and statutory malpractices included issuance of multiple ballot papers, improper influence, denial of voters' right to vote, discrepancies in the number of votes cast with the number of voters who turned up to vote in several polling stations, variations in the number of votes cast for different electoral seats when compared, involvement in electoral malpractices by 3 polling clerks, failure by returning officers to give reasons for unsigned Form 35A, failure by the respondent to avail to Form 35B and unused Form 35A booklets for scrutiny, existence of 2 Form 35B formatting of Kim's kits and the court's opinion on Kim's kit, failure by the respondents to produce polling station diaries that were tampered with, and arranged failure by the presiding officers to swear oath of secrecy and alterations that were not countersigned. Quoting Article 2 of the Supremacy of the Constitution, it was the appellant's counsel's submission that proved of an infringement of a constitutional provision in the manner in which the election was conducted would automatically lead to nullification. Before we ponder on the above outlined irregularities, their legal ramification and their effects on the election, we note there has to be a nexus between the alleged constitutional violations and the results of the impugned elections, as was the case stated by the Supreme Court in the Raila Odinga 2013 case. The appellants predicates his case on the trial court's observation at paragraph 69 of the judgment that the respondent did not call the returning officer to controvert the evidence of PW23 relating to issuance of multiple ballot papers at Chani Social Hall polling station number 5, and thus the same remained firm. He submitted that this was a clear violation of the constitutional principle of free and fair elections and Article 81. We note that there was a similar observation by the trial court in relation to our Ashind Nursery School polling station number 6 as regards the evidence of PW10. On its part, the third respondent submitted that failure by the first and second respondents to call witnesses to controvert the evidence of PW 23 and 10 does not mean that the same evidence meets the required threshold. The sent extra ballot papers, if any, were intercepted before they could be cast, and thus no candidate benefited from their use. The first and second respondents submitted that the trial judge properly addressed her mind on the issue and even observed that at the time of highlighting of submissions, the case of 2 polling clerks that had been charged for issuing extra ballot papers was still pending and unproved. On the invitation to draw a negative inference on the first and second respondents' failure to call the returning officer, we reiterate the position as outlined earlier. The trial court observed that PW 23 could not tell if the extra ballot papers issued were for presidential or parliamentary seats. It is therefore difficult to establish a direct link between that occurrence and the validity of the specific election of the member of the National Assembly. In our view, this is a finding of fact made by the learned judge after evaluating the evidence adduced before the courts. We are not inclined to interfere with it. We'll deal with the issue of improper influence of assisted voters. The appellant stated that the court ought to have found that the election was not conducted in accordance with the Act, since it found the first and second respondents improperly influenced voters to vote in favor of the third respondent.
That is the Court of Appeal deciding on the fate of Member of Parliament for Changamwe. We shall keep you up to speed once she's done reading out that particular ruling. Now, in the meantime, the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining has stated that the British oil company Tullow Oil, which suspended its operations yesterday, is expected to resume work next week, following an MOU that is to be signed tomorrow between the locals and the company. Kamau also said that Petroleum Cabinet Secretary John Munyes is currently in Turkana, going over the details of that memorandum of understanding. Let's listen into part of what he had to say.
Did not suspend the trucking yesterday. The trucking was suspended a month ago after you saw what happened at the camps. The camp was invaded. You saw those visuals of the people breaking into Ngamia 8, where the oil was being transported to. And of course, because they have a lot of foreign workers, they thought in interests of safety that they should close the camp and move away. Thursday last week, we received a draft agreement, an MOU, because what has been going on, of course, you've been reading, there have been work stoppages going on, and we needed to find a way in which we can resolve some of these issues without violence, you know? So what the agreement does, the MOU does, is between the county government, the local MPs, the local leaders and the communities, and Tullow Oil. It is then witnessed by the Ministry of Petroleum and Mining and the Ministry of Interior. So we are witnesses to the agreement. And basically the agreement is very simple. It basically says, if we have a disagreement, if we have a grievance, how do we deal with the grievance in a structured way, where you come and say, so-and-so has aggrieved me in this way, we resolve it. If we cannot resolve it, we escalate to the county. If we cannot resolve it at the county, we escalate it to the national level. And that's basically what the agreement is. I know it was discussed at the Turkana County Assembly yesterday, and today the Cabinet Secretary is in Lodwar and will be going for more meetings in Lokicha, of which to then socialize the agreement with the leaders in Lokicha. If all is agreed, when I spoke to the Cabinet Secretary this morning, he expects the agreement to be signed on Friday. Now we hope that going forward, that we will then keep to those grievance mechanisms, because what happens is that when grievances take a long time, people forget what they were and they become a bigger issue than they really were. So I think one of the things, as soon as the agreement is signed, then we will sit down with Tullow, the local community, go through the legacy issues. What have been the problems in the past? let's deal with those so that when we start with a new slate. I think one of the things that is now coming to the fore is what early oil pilot scheme was all about. These are the issues that we need to sort out on a small volume. Imagine we are only incurring a cost now of $100,000 per day due to the delay. If we had brought all the oil rigs to Turkana, we started building the pipeline, the loss per day would be a lot more. And it's important that we iron out these issues now before we go into full field production.
And of course, we are watching how that particular project will go. You remember President Kenyatta flew to Turkana to actually launch the early oil project. Maybe just a quick comment about this. And the main issue here is about resource sharing and distribution, and of course, opportunities for the locals in a situation where investments have come on board. Maybe just a quick comment on that.
I love the last statement. It talks about they settled it on a non-violent way. That means that they realized that there was a disconnect between the community and their resources.
Yeah.
So the way they have settled it, that is commendable. Because first of all, before you take any given resource from somewhere, they could have negotiated on what they are getting and how the community is going to benefit with the whole process of this oil. And so even if the oil will be leaving, everybody will be feeling that we are part and parcel. So they need to own it. They
you
need
do
to
remember the
manage
kind
it
of tiff we saw between President Kenyatta and Josephat Nanok back in Turkana.
Yes.
And the bone of contention here was in regards to the 5% of revenue share.
Yes.
And the county government has since said that that has been addressed, but how do we ensure that such projects benefit the community first before it goes to national share?
Yeah, that is why they have to come with the priority in terms of that 5%, if you negotiate about it. Where are the channels of the development towards the common man? If it's about schools, can you do the schools? If it is about roads, can they do the roads? If it is about health centers, can they do the health centers? So that it's something that is actually in touch with the community. Because it's not about distributing money to the community. No. It's about doing those given initiatives or coming up with social amenities that can be accessible and to the standard of, international standard, that the community can now feel that as much as we have the oil with us, but now the goodies has come with the oil. So that is what the community was actually talking about, and that is how we need to actually make them feel that they are part and parcel of the whole process.
Thank you, Carl. Now, the Mao eviction process remains of concern to many, specifically members of parliament, even in the Senate. Now, one person who has come hot on the heels in the midst of this conversation is Elgeyo Marakwet Senator Kipchumba Murkomen, whose sentiments did not rub off a section of Jubilee members the right way. Let's now listen in to what he had to say today, speaking to Anda Sihachi, just 2 days after a consultative meeting with leaders from that particular region. Let's listen in. Okay, we do apologize for that. We'll try to fix the sound on that. And as soon as we do, we shall just listen in to what the senator had to say, and that is in line with Marta's Mao evictions. Now, yet another story that has been making headlines this morning is that the Chief Justice, David Maraga, has reiterated that, of course, the cut down of by government in terms of the amount budgeted for the judiciary has been slashed by half. In fact, in his own words, he asked Kenyans to bear with the slow process that might come after this, even in the hope that they hope to deliver justice. And I'm sure you've gone through that particular statement, Carl. The initial budget was about 30.1 billion shillings, and now what the Chief Justice says they have is about 14 billion shillings, slowing the entire judiciary down. An action by members of parliament.
That is why most of the time I always say that our parliament is a big letdown. You know, when it comes to now what we call the development of given other arms of the government, then they always take a backseat. This is what we are talking about. The budget strangulation when it comes to the judiciary. What are the implications? One, the projects, the construction projects that were ongoing in all, I think there are 41 or 49, okay? They will have to stall. When we talk of the World Bank funded projects, they will stall. The government funded projects, they will stall. The mobile courts that were, they were all over the country, they will also be affected. The Judiciary Service Commission, their operations are also going to be affected. Not only that, if a budget has been requested for the development, and they are requesting for, I think it was about 14.3 billion, and you give them 50 million. I mean, how practical is that? Because if we request for 14.3 billion for the development, and then you make it come to 50 million, then that means we are going to stall the entire process of from the courts, from the mobile courts to the judicial operations, and then...
because we'll continue this discussion, just yesterday a member of the Law Society of Kenya said even, this particular reduction comes in the midst of, the judiciary is still struggling.
Yes.
What do you make of that? Because some operations, he was speaking from Mombasa to Fred Kai yesterday. He said in Mombasa alone, operations were not that, were not streamlined enough for you to actually cut down the budget.
Yeah, I think it's really going to make the worst situation be worst. Because if you cut down into what was actually being proposed to be higher, and instead of even what they were given on 2017, 2018, now we've actually dropped it back to I don't know how much. So okay. It's worrying.
I'll come back to you, Carl, on this. And the question that we're simply asking is whether this is perhaps a revisit of the judiciary. We'll come back to that on that note. Now, like I mentioned to you, the Court of Appeal in Mombasa is set to decide the fate of Changamwe Member of Parliament. And happening right now is that ruling being read out. Let's listen in.
We agree with the position taken by this court in the Ranguma case, and consequently find this ground unmerited. We shall now analyze the specific malpractices highlighted by the appellants. Electoral malpractices by 3 polling clerks, unsigned Form 35A, failure by the respondents to avail material for scrutiny, existence of 2 Form 35B, and formatting of Kim's kit, the oath of secrecy, and alterations that were not countersigned were some of the malpractices cited by the appellant as having compromised the constitutional parameters expected to be met for an election to qualify to be deemed free and fair. Although the court made a recommendation to DPP to institute investigations and make a determination on whether or not the 3 polling clerks should be charged with an election offense. According to the appellant, the court should have found that there was a violation of Article 10, 81, and 86 of the Constitution. The trial court made a recommendation to DPP to investigate the 3 polling clerks for possible electoral malpractices. Those clerks remain innocent until proven guilty. The appellant needed to go a step further and demonstrate how the conduct of these clerks affected the final election result for Changamwe constituency. Failure by returning officers to give reasons for some Form 35A that were not signed by the agents was also a point of contention by the appellant. The requirement to give reasons for refusal or failure by an agent to sign the statutory forms is outlined under Regulation 79(3) of the regulations. The obligation is placed on the agent or candidate to give the reasons for failure to sign the declaration form and not the presiding officer. And this is what the regulation states. I quote, "Where any candidate or agent refuses or otherwise fails to sign the declaration form, the candidate or agent shall be required to record the reasons for the refusal or failure to sign." Further, Regulation 79 provides that failure of a candidate or agent to sign a declaration form does not invalidate the announced results. Therefore, this ground fails. Regarding existence of Form 2 Form 35B, the appellant contended that failure by the first and second respondents to avail one of the forms for scrutiny despite the order of the trial court should have raised a red flag. He submitted that a negative inference ought to have been made that the same, if produced, would have been prejudicial to the respondent's case. The trial court, in its judgment, found the explanation for the existence of two Form 35As plausible and accepted the same. It further observed that the results in the said forms were similar, and thus no prejudice was suffered by any party. Again, we cannot interfere with the said finding of fact by the trial court. In relation to the formatting of Kim's kit, we do not see how the same would have affected the election results, given that all the information required for verification would be available on SD cards, which ought to be availed by the first respondent upon application by a party. We do not find any error in the trial court's opinion on Kim's kit either. As a court of law, it has jurisdiction to pronounce itself on all matters raised before it concerning the impugned elections. On alleged failure by the presiding officers to swear oath of secrecy, the appellant submitted that the second respondent failed to submit oaths of secrecy sworn by the presiding officers for 69 polling stations, and that those supplied were not properly executed. To him, this was a grave anomaly, as it would not be verified on which authority the presiding officers were acting. The trial court did not find the contentions of the appellant on failure to avail and signed oaths of secrecy by presiding officers to be of importance on the bearing of the petition. The court was satisfied with the explanation that the oath was taken as a ceremony officiated by the Chief Magistrate Mombasa, and the original submitted for signing to the Saint Magistrates. Concerning alterations that were not countersigned,
Changamwe Member of Parliament Omar Mwinyi is said to know his fate once the judge is done reading her ruling there. We shall keep you up to speed on that, and of course crossing over there shortly. But for now, we take a short commercial break. We'll be right back.